college football fans, welcome back to the College Ball Show. He's Marshall, I'm Chris, and we're here to talk some good old-fashioned college football. And man, what a championship week we had. We had some surprises, we had some beatdowns. We were just talking off air that you do not talk down to Lord Saban, because he will make you pay, as Alabama made Georgia pay 41-24. Schooled them. Oklahoma State just shy of a possible playoff berth. Cincinnati, good for you guys. Good for you. The group of five in the Power Five, that's been the struggle. They are in with a 35-20 win. Michigan kind of grinds Iowa down and then pours it on 42-3. Utah poured it on Oregon right away. No waiting there. Same with Pitt and Wake Forest. Big game by Utah State out of nowhere, 46-13. Our Raging Cajuns from Louisiana got the dub as well. So it's going to be kind of a short show today. We're not going to do preview and predictions for games that are almost a month from now. Usually how we do it, we'll just do the recap, and then we'll take a few weeks off, let some bowl game action happen, come back. It'll be on a Monday, more than likely anyway. And then Friday on New Year's Eve is the semifinals. So there's going to be big games before that, a couple big games after that. So we'll wait on the whole preview and predictions so we can come back in a few weeks, do a recap from what we got, and then go from there. But yeah, man, that was definitely interesting in a variety of ways, like I mentioned. And the coaching carousel keeps going. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Notre Dame has since filled the vacancy that we talked about last week. Brian Kelly, quicker than we thought, has a Southern accent. Mario Cristobal is back where he belongs in Miami. So there's a lot to discuss, no doubt about it. But if this is their first time listening to the College Ball Show, welcome. It streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. You don't have to go to Blog Talk and Rope-A-Dope if you don't want to and download the show directly there or listen to the browse. You can find this College Ball Show under the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, almost everywhere else part of the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegruelingtruth.com. And one more thing. If you're thinking about cutting the cord or you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called DirecTV Stream. The prices start as low as $69.99 a month. It's the best of live TV and on-demand, no annual contracts, no hidden fees. If you upgrade to the choice and ultimate packages, that'll give you 3 free months of HBO Max, and you get to enjoy regional sports networks with no additional fees. If you go to all the way to the premier package, that'll give you HBO Max and Showtime included. That's DirecTV Stream. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host Marshall now and see how he's doing on this fine Monday afternoon, or Monday night, I should say, that last night a frickin' cold front came in like crazy with wind gusting. And right now it went from like pretty nice weather to single digits. Now it's got a chance to be a high of 40 in, a few days from now. You know how Minnesota is, but it all of a sudden got cold up here, up north here.
So my best friend was visiting me this past weekend, who lives in Fargo, which is only a 3.5-hour drive from Minneapolis, and probably normally a worse degree or two of weather than where you live, my family lives. And he's like, holy shit, it's 72 degrees. When he landed Friday, it was 72 degrees with like a breeze. And he's like, dude, he's like, I'm happy I came to visit you. So there
it's
are
-2 straight up north in Cross Lake right now, and it's 1 degrees in Duluth.
Good God. So I do miss family and friends, but I do not miss that weather because good Lord. So speaking of that good friend of mine who was down here, we were driving to a sports bar, a beautiful sports bar in Addison, Texas. And I remember telling him, I said, literally, we are about to bet on Oklahoma State and Georgia. I said that those coaches are named Mike Gundy and Kirby Smart. What is wrong with us? But Chris, everything felt like those were at least intelligent bets. Obviously, they weren't locks and they weren't right, but for the most part, people thought, and especially when you found out that Oklahoma State's starting quarterback was dinged up and they had a true freshman. I kept telling myself, I can't believe I'm betting Kirby Smart and Mike Gundy. Like, those are words I don't normally say. And my God, it turned out to be the wrong choice. And for the Oklahoma State game, if you bet that game, enjoy a drink with me this week, because I think it will take a week to truly forget and just try to fathom how they lost the game. Oklahoma State, Chris, had 17 plays from the Baylor 10 or in. They scored 1 touchdown on 17 tries. Now, I'm not saying you got to have like 5 or 6, but you have 1 touchdown on 17 plays where you have a play designed to score. They were on the 1 yard line 7 times and couldn't score. The word my buddy used was soft, and I think that's the best word. And yes, I do realize that all these linemen could beat me up in a fight, but when you're talking football among football, and your linemen cannot punch it in on the 1 yard line 7 times, soft is the fair term, or maybe Baylor is that much more physical and stronger of a team. There's something missing. And then it becomes a mental gap or a mental block, Chris. I kind of think that as this game wore on, if you're the Oklahoma State play caller, you got to be pulling out your hair. Because you're thinking, okay, Kat, let's try off tackle. Let's try up the center. Let's try a quarterback sneak. Oh, well, damn, we can't run the ball. Let's try a play action. Let's try a lob it up. Like, every play you called was getting shut down. Yet you were driving the ball up and down the field at a decent rate in the second half. But to see that number of attempts and then a valiant effort for Oklahoma State to win on the final play of the game, in case you missed it, it was a 4th and 1, 4 seconds to go. Oklahoma State runs the ball kind of off tackle, and it was one of those plays where the running back saw that it was going to get jammed, so he kind of bounced around, pops kind of did a little semicircle, and was run to the pylon. And I would say 90% of the time you see a running back bounce it back out, there's no one on defense that has a chance to make a play. But as you were saying perfectly before the show, Chris, the DB that made that play took the perfect angle. I'll let you finish this one, brother.
Yeah, I mean, when you first see the guy pop out from Oklahoma State, you're like, he's got it. You know, that, like you said, most of the time you got it. It seems like it was there. He definitely, to me, it looked like he had the angle. But
sure,
not only running laterally, right? Of course, you're going to run laterally because the old boy's trying to go to the end zone. But he took an aggressive angle, too. He pushed forward and sideways just enough to where all of a sudden halfway through the run, you're like, holy crap, it's even almost now. And the Oklahoma State, player dove for it, inches away, and it was Jaron McVay. And so there's some interesting backstory on him. He grew up 30 minutes from Baylor, 2-star recruit coming out of high school. Only scholarship offer received was from Texas Southern. He was a walk-on in 2016. He had the COVID 6 year, and he just made the championship tackle. That was pretty freaking dope, man. That one blew me away. I couldn't believe he had that angle. And also, even though it did get to 21-3 in the first half, when you look at how the game started for them, I mean, interception, 3 and out. Even to start the second half, an interception. They had another interception and a fumble. Like, it could have been way worse. Luckily, Oklahoma State has a good defense, obviously. But to go 17 plays, 89 yards in about 3 minutes, and to turn that puppy over on downs, man, that had to have been really heartbreaking coming up that close. And when you look at it, yeah, of course, we don't know 100% if Oklahoma State would have got in. But I'm guessing they would have. And that is just a guess. But to beat two top 10 teams that the committee themselves had in the top 10 right before it, I think they would have gotten in. On the flip side, Bama in Georgia, Georgia starts out real solid, up 10-0. And it almost felt like they didn't look back. Now, of course, Bama came back, or I should say once Bama got on the board, it felt like they didn't look back, but they did. They tied it up 17-7. It was 24-17 at half. They had that, that drive at the beginning to get up 31-17. And then there was a pick. Then there was a turnover on downs after a long, 12-play, almost 6-minute drive. Shoot, the other one was a 6-minute drive too. I didn't realize that. And then obviously an interception touchdown, but it could have been way worse of a beatdown, even though, 38-17 is still a beatdown at that point. But, I guess like I said earlier, you don't sit there and rip Bama, because Lord Saban will strike back. And I'm pretty sure, Marshall, this year, Bryce Young heard the show last week because he set the record for most total yards in any, and just so you know, there's been some good players in that SEC championship game. 421 through the air, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and 40 on the ground, set the record for total yards. Bama all of a sudden came alive, like they just needed to be put in the corner as, hey guys, you're not as good, but that sure didn't show up like that.
Yeah, that was a Heisman type performance. That was a hell of a game. And yes, maybe there was this news clippings, and Saban, that guy doesn't miss a single freaking beat of words. Like he's kind of like Tiger.
7 Twitter burner accounts.
Yeah, a lot of those special GOAT athletes, even LeBron, they don't wait when a single bad word is said, they don't miss it. Now they might not tell us that, but it gets to them. So I'm sure Saban was disappointed with how his team played against Auburn. That was a very poor performance from a team who you just saw did that against Georgia. But yes, you did feel that once the second quarter got going, you felt like Bama was going to score as much as they want to, and they were going to take their foot off the gas. And that just turned out to be true. They did. They scored 41 points, but you almost feel like in the fourth quarter, it was kind of like, we won. We got the game down. Obviously, you not want risking more injuries. Losing Manchie does kill them. That guy is their most talented wide receiver. I'm not saying that they can't win it at all without him, but you're obviously trying, Chris, to avoid any more injuries if possible. So maybe you take your foot off the gas a little bit, maybe pull a couple of starters out. But yeah, it was funny too, because I was telling my buddy, hell, Oak State went down, so I'm sure this Kirby Smart bet's going to go down too. And that might be the last time I ever say "Go Dogs" in my group chat. I think what we saw was a combination, Chris, of Bama's best game of the year, hands down. Because again, this offense had struggled with LSU, Auburn, and looked mediocre or average against Arkansas. But you could tell, okay, this was a big game. Obviously, Saban had the guys ready. Everything about this game, you saw the best ability of what this offense has that you've not seen all year. That was the case in point. But I'm going to say one thing to you, and then we'll kind of move on, or discuss it. But I think what we saw was the effect of who was in Georgia's side of the bracket. So, in all honesty, in the SEC West, Bama number 1 this year. My boy Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin number 8. Arkansas, who probably had the hardest schedule in the country this year, if not top 4, is in there. Mississippi State 4-4. Texas A&M, who beat Bama 4-4, ranked 25th. Auburn, who had a hell of a season and one of the best non-conference schedules in the year, was almost dead last, and LSU's dead last. All 7 of those teams, Chris, are honestly pretty damn good. I'm not saying they're all like incredible, like they all deserve gold medals, but there's not a weak team in that conference. But Georgia had Kentucky, who finished 22nd, had a decent season. Tennessee, ups and downs. They finished 4-4. I'd probably consider them average. Missouri had a disappointing year. South Carolina, disappointing year. Florida finished 2-6, disappointing year. Vandy, 0-8. So I think what we saw was a combination of Georgia's defense was really good, but you got to beat up on a weaker side of your conference division to make your numbers look better than they probably were when facing a good team. Again, is Georgia a great team? Yes. Could they still win the title? Quite possibly, yes. But when you read off 7 great teams, and in your side of the conference you had a Kentucky team which was good, and then you have 5 teams that were below average to their standards, or Tennessee may be average at best, it maybe go to show how those numbers got inflated and how we all fed into it. And we're like, oh shit, this was the Bama that we can see. And this Georgia teams wasn't quite the world beaters of picking on SoCar, Florida, and Vandy.
I will say that though, like, I don't think what we were looking at from Bama, I think Bama just peaked. Well, hopefully for Bama, well, I shouldn't say hopefully, but they're hoping that they didn't peak either. You know what I mean? Ohio State seemed to peak a little early. Maybe Georgia did too. Maybe Bama just peaked, and that's the best performance we'll get. Maybe they just need to be challenged. I agree with you when the Georgia thing, when you look at it from, you know, a little bit more with a fine-tooth comb, but it's still the Bama we were seeing is still, I'm not ready to say they're just hands down for sure they're going to win it all, you know what I mean, just because it's like, is it hard to pick against them? Yeah, but I don't think it was just like, I still think there's measurements that you saw out of them that they're not as dominant as they were. But man, that was talk about, you know, big brother, little brother stuff, man. It's just wow. The Oregon-Utah game just wasn't a game from the jump. Utah, shouts out to them. This is their, you know, since they joined the conference, I think this is their first time going to the Rose Bowl. And that coach has been great for a while, like very, very, maybe not great, but very, very, very good. Like, yes. He is like a B+, A- type guy. And at times they show A, and they have down the stretch here this season. So that's a really cool thing to see Utah. And I think it's Ohio State. So that's a nice little story right there. It was 14-0 pretty quick, 14-3 at half. And even 21-3, like early fourth quarter, and then Michigan said, we're going to put up 42 points. And it was 42-3, just a dominant performance. Speaking of dominant performance, Pittsburgh dominated Wake Forest. We picked Pitt, but man, I didn't know they'd win by that, 45-21. And then to hold Wake Forest to 21, that's pretty freaking impressive too. Michigan back-to-back games of scoring 42. They have McNamara, who is their main quarterback, but they bring in a McCaffrey at times. And they have Haskins as a running back, no doubt. But they also mix it up with a variety of runners. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that got the ball on Saturday. 34 carries, 211, 6.2 a pop with the long 67-yarder, 4 touchdowns, and they still threw the ball for 250 yards. This Michigan team is peaking at the right time, and Iowa's defense is really solid. I think that's what obviously kept them in the game. But, saying did they peak last week, with that Ohio State win, for them to back it up and finish strong, they're heading in to these semifinals really hot too.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, even if Michigan had a hangover from beating Ohio State, Iowa's offense is so pitiful, Chris. I mean, they threw 38 passes in that game. They had 175 yards. Petrus was 9 of 22 for $137. Padilla was 10 of 15 for 38 yards. it is hard to throw 15 passes in a football game when your team won the side of your division in a respectable conference and have 38 yards. Now, with that being said, I believe Spencer Saunders was just as bad as both these guys. But I move on from him because I don't want to speak of him for another year or two. But again, whether or not that this was going to be a great test, and that's what we actually broke that down in the show nicely. I literally mentioned how Michigan could be hung over, but Iowa's offense has struggled a lot ever since they kind of had that number 2 ranking. And yeah, you just saw that Michigan didn't clearly sleepwalk enough. Like it was 14-3 in the first quarter. So you come out strong, then you put up a couple of goose eggs, and Iowa they had 3 points all game, which even for a team who has, at least a decent running game and a couple of wide receivers, like you figure you could do something, but it wasn't happening. Michigan stayed locked in. And as we've seen this year, Chris, a couple of these teams who are like defensive run oriented teams like a Iowa or a Wisconsin who kind of takes pride in their defense, when you get down 14 to 20 points and you're not a team meant to pass the ball, you really put your quarterback then at a huge disadvantage because the defense can pin their ears back and run at you, and you're more of a ground control game, and that makes matters even worse for a team like that. And you saw the final score get out of hand like the way it did. But hey, credit to Michigan. We've been waiting or not we, but the country's been waiting for Harbaugh or Michigan fans to take his team to a spot like this, to make it to the Big Ten title game and then to win. Now you're in the first college football playoff for your team in history. So we'll see how he's obviously got a tough matchup coming up. But yeah, credit to Harbaugh and Michigan, and you focus down. You beat your big brother. You beat him actually pretty well. You took care of Iowa now. Now it's time to regroup. You got a good solid 3.5 weeks to do film on Georgia. And I think Harbaugh's clearly, he's got the monkey off his back for now. Like he's proven he can take his team there. Obviously, I don't think any Michigan fans expects the title that they have a chance to get it, Chris. But the expectations, you got to feel a little happy for the guy because he's been under a lot of fire and he's proven himself, that he is capable. And I think as a Michigan fan, a realistic fan, I think you got to be happy with where you're at now. And any win from this point on will probably be seen as a icing on the cake.
Yeah, no doubt. Cincinnati and Houston, Houston puts up points, and they were hot going in. They had a bad win to start off the season, but they strung together a bunch of wins. It was 14-13 since he was up at a half. Then it was like the offense came through and the defense came through, that complementary football, and they just blew them out. I mean, there was a late touchdown, no doubt, but if you look at it, first drive touchdown, second drive touchdown, third drive touchdowns for Cincinnati, and on defense, interception that set up another touchdown, punt, punt, punt. There's the touchdown and a turnover on downs. So they ran the ball extremely well. I think they got over 200 yards. You have 210. And Ritter did just enough through 3 touchdowns, no picks. It is a good story though, and nice to see Cincinnati get in. I talked about Oklahoma State. Had they have won, I do believe they would have jumped them, but that didn't happen. And in this year, it's crazy. Michigan makes it. The way Alabama made it was pretty impressive. And then now Cincinnati, undefeated, gets in as a non-Power 5 for the very first time in general. So that's a great story.
Credits, I agree. And I wish
they didn't lose their coach to Notre Dame either.
Man, we
were talking about last week. Like, man, if that happened, that would tell me that one sucked.
Yeah, and that second week when they made the playoff committee numbers, and everyone in all the sharps and whales in Vegas were pounding Cincinnati to miss, and you could have got Cincinnati to make the playoff like plus 350, which you said, you're like, well, dude, if you do the math here, they have a great chance. I wish we could have joined in on that because it was minus 500 they missed the playoff. And really, I mean, you could have said there was a sweat, and obviously, if that ball touches the pylon, you're right. All of a sudden we're looking at damn since he missed it. So it wasn't by any means a lock. But That would have been a nice little bet to get action on, because they made it, and there's a lot of money that said they wouldn't when the playoffs first started coming out over a month ago. Let me ask you one fun talking point, because I saw a group of, I guess, Twitter police who were freaking out over this. Did you see the play in the Wake Forest Pitt game when Pickett, he broke the pocket and was running down the field, and he did a little bit of a bait. It's not really
a little bit. Not a little bit. He faked a slide.
He did, but he did a fake slide, but he didn't stumble over his feet, but he kept his momentum going. Should there be a rule against that?
That should be illegal. That's bullshit. It's funny. If he was my quarterback, I'd be laughing. I still was laughing. It's funny. I get why he's doing it, because quarterbacks, especially in the league he's about to go into, can get away with a whole bunch of shit. So I get it. I'm not ripping the player at all. It was a great move. It was an awesome move. But fuck that as being able to do that. Because how many more rules, they're not laws, they're rules, are we going to put in place in football where the defender is just sitting player safety is number one, no doubt about it. But we all know what spearing is. We all know all this shit. Anyone that watches football for 20 years plus, you're damn near an expert at replays and shit. You know the intent. Well, you can't necessarily say the intent, but you know if it's like that's a penalty, that's a clear penalty. Yeah, whatever. There's some in-betweens, I get it. But for the amount of times that someone slides late already, just sliding late, not faking slide, not straight up sliding, but slides late. And the amount of times where the quarterback then goes down and the guy's already in the air and they get called, that should be a penalty. You should go back to maybe just that. You should get credit for the run, but wherever it happened, you take it 15 yards back, because that is completely bullshit and it should be outlawed. And call me Twitter police if you're on the other side of it, that's fine. But I think that's bullshit, just because how many more things can we put up against these defenders? We get it. You want to see points, but no, I'm not down for that. Funny as shit, good move, worth doing it because it's legal, but I don't think it should be legal.
So let me ask you then just one follow-up on this. Do you think we could make the proper verbiage for this to become a rule to where a referee could call it properly? Because it gets into that, what example shows a fake slide? That would be my own thing of, could we find the proper words to use for it to be a rule set in stone? Do you think that would be possible?
Well, I mean, we already are trying to do football moves, which we all know. You get cleats, you get a helmet, you got pads. Whatever move you do, that's a football move. So, yeah, I get what you're saying and how to rule it. And we already see some fake going out of bounces before, too. It doesn't. It's not all the time, but you do see it.
Mm-hmm.
You do see it. And I think, though, the fake out of bounds is a minorly different, but because you can be going that way and then cut. But I think it's pretty easy to see a fake slide because you do have to commit so much to sliding. As far as the verbiage and all that, I don't know. I see your point on it, and you're bringing up a good point because you can get lost in translation. And I think the sideline will be harder for that, what you're talking about. But I think a full-on slide where you're doing the baseball slide, I think it's pretty easy to see a fake one.
Fair enough. I was curious for your perspective. And you're right, I thought it was kind of funny and clever at first, but...
Oh, it's funny. It was awesome. And like you said, he kept his balance. But that's cool.
I don't think a lot of quarterbacks could be able to manage the way he did. But
he had to have practiced that, dude.
I know. You're right.
That shit was funny. But I'd be pissed as hell if it happened to me.
But yeah, you're right. Because from the defensive perspective, you're right. If you hit the guy, then it's boom, it's 15 yards. Or coach is tuning out, you might even get a targeting. So yeah, how many more stipulations can we give? Yeah, and all of a sudden, you're getting reamed by the coach. Yeah, that is. And if it happened
past half, you're out of next game too at the first half.
Sure. Yeah, you're missing your bowl game or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Fair point. That is true. That is true.
Classic,
so
definitely a funny highlight though.
But yeah, and one of the reasons why the show is shorter is because there's really no debate as to who made the Final Four. I do think there was a little bit of good old boys home cooking, because you could have argued that from how the teams finished, you could have possibly put Georgia down to 4 because Cincinnati ran the table. Michigan had a good win, but you knew the committee wasn't going to have a Georgia-Bama repeat matchup. I think that was maybe saved by the name and persona.
And I think that's legit too. It sounds weird, but I do think it's legit.
Yeah, I think you'd have a slightly debatable
You can go
point
Michigan 1 though and Georgia 4.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I think that was maybe a minor thing, but you knew the committee wasn't going to have a Georgia Bama repeat just because, well, and maybe it's debatable, maybe it's just where they should have been, but it was a fun weekend, and yeah, you're right. To slowly wrap up a game you did touch on nicely. Hey, for those people that said, well, hey, Utah, you can't beat Oregon twice like you did last week. Really? Because Chris, the scoreboard don't look much different. and the box score doesn't either.
No. It was right away. It was just like, yeah, you're done, dude. It's 20 zip. It's 23 to zip at half. I was impressed.
It was. And we're to the point where we will do a couple of podcasts, because even though it gets kind of funny, I do love breaking down some bowl games, because even though there's some that will be crappy, Chris and I will get to the point where there's actually, even scrolling through, I think they did a great job of picking bowl games this year. There's a lot of teams this year who maybe they didn't have the best seasons, but for brand name and what kind of team they are, they actually have a lot of good bowl games this year. But Chris and I will get to breaking those down as we go throughout the year, because betting bowl games is fun. I don't recommend a lot of money, but you see a lot
shaky, but it is fun.
It is fun, because I guarantee I will have a massive rant or 2 or 3 on, man, Chris, I took this bowl game and you will not believe what the hell happened. Because I think these coaches, you lose a little bit of the sabermetrics. Analytics say do this. Well, hell, it's a bowl game. F it, I'm doing this. And you're like, what are you doing? This is not normal.
And make sure you check to see who's already gone in the draft and all that too. Not the big bowls, but other than that, you got to watch that. Last year was COVID. This year, you got to go back to watching who's there. But yeah, like Pitt, Michigan, Oregon, Oklahoma, Wake Forest, A&M. I mean, there's some interesting. Penn State, Arkansas. Had the Gophers not lost to Bowling Green, guess who would have been in that January 1st bowl? The Minnesota Gophers against Arkansas.
Damn.
Oklahoma State, Notre Dame. That's a fun game. Iowa, Kentucky. Why don't you just look in the mirror at each other?
I know.
Because that's what that is, Baylor, Ole Miss, Yeah, I do like these matchups.
And to kind of wrap this up, do you have any issue with the and again, they've kind of bounced around this, but going back to the New Year's Eve games, I will say though that the Bama Cincy's at 2:30, Georgia Michigan 6:30.
Like they bumped it up like an hour.
Yeah.
Than the last time they did this.
So your Georgia Michigan game probably gets done around 10, and you're probably not losing the majority of your diehards for New Year's parties. So again, the New Year's Eve, when they first did those games, it kind of backfired on them, but maybe they're thinking, Chris, with the earlier times, and it is a Friday, that rating for Cincy,
Saturday
Bama,
and Sunday will be taken by.
You're
Saturday
right.
and Sunday will be taken by the NFL.
True. Yeah.
The NFL last they do. Remember the last 2 Saturdays they do NFL on.
Yeah, you're right. You can't. And then the later
you're not going to go head to head with NFL.
You're right, and the later you go into the night, the more it cuts in New Year's Eve. So that Bama Cincy 2:30 is a really tough time for a Friday. But you're right, there's not really any other option for said games.
I think it's just going to happen like every 5th year or something.
Yeah, you're right. Well, let me give you a little question to think out here, unless you have anything else in your mind right now.
No.
Okay. Well, let's just go over the initial thoughts of the point spreads, then we'll wrap this baby up. So Alabama minus 13.5 over under 58. Do you think that is the treatment Bama deserves, or do people maybe down Cincy? I think that's probably a fair line. I know Cincy had a great year, but from that Bama team we just saw, Chris, I think that they could repeat what just happened. Do you think the Bama minus 13.5 is a fair line? And how would you look at it if you were throwing down a little bit for fun? Just off the initial, before we got injuries or what could happen the next month, initial thoughts on that Bama Cincy line.
Yeah, because the what is it, Manchie or Manchie? What is it, Manchie?
Manchie, yeah, Manchie or Manchie, yeah.
He's done. He got an ACL.
Mm-hmm.
He's done. Not that they still have that Williams dude though, and he's going off. He's got like 15 touchdowns, so it's not like they're screwed or anything. But that does add up. Looking at it, if we look about, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up because we've been talking about this Bama a lot, right? We've done these it's 18.5, it's 20.5, and remember what was it, 21.5 for Auburn? Did it close at that or something like that?
Around 20, yeah. And Ole Miss was like at 21 open, they got that bid down to 15, they won by 19. They've been pretty dead on all year, despite that Auburn game, obviously. Yeah,
right. But it's worth bringing up because we have been talking about this, and I think it's fair. I do think it's fair. Now, Cincinnati showed up last year against Georgia and almost beat them and had a good lead. Probably, you could maybe say they probably should have beat them watching the game, but I think 13.5 is fair, yeah.
And the one thing you do know is that Cincinnati has 3 starting people in their defensive backfield are going to NFL. So if there is a team that can maybe slow down Bama, maybe it is when you have 3 future Sunday players. And
they're good in the trenches too.
Yeah, they are. They
showed that against Georgia last year.
Trap it up. Speaking of Georgia minus 7.5 against Michigan. I guess I'm a little surprised with that number just because Michigan has been rock solid of late with a great win against Ohio State, a convincing win against Iowa. Do you think there's a little too much love for Georgia? I would probably lean taking Michigan I'm getting 7.5 plus a hook. And again, if you want to talk about Georgia plays tough in the trenches, Michigan's the same style of football team, Chris. I would say that initial line is maybe a little too much love, or I would lean towards the Amazing Blue.
Yeah, I mean, I would take that points with Michigan right now, 7.5 for sure. I would. And I was talking about how, Iowa and Kentucky look in the mirror. Well, shit, like you said, look in the mirror with these two teams. They like to do a lot. You can make an argument team speed though on the skill positions might favor Michigan. They got some speed demons, and they also got this defensive end who's, I don't know if people have been watching the last few games, but he's pretty decent. He's a pretty decent defensive edge. He get 3 sacks in that big game against Ohio State. He is now one of the Heisman finalists too. Speaking of Hutchinson. So, and by the way, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Kenny Pickett, Kenny Fake-a-Slide Pickett, and then Hutchinson are the Heisman finalists, by the way. So your guy did get left out in the cold.
I'm not even going to go on that rant because I'm going to end the show on a positive note because I'm a happy person.
Well, you're going to do it after, right? You're going to do it after they win in the first.
I've sent a couple of words in my group chat that would not be school appropriate for a man that's a teacher, so I'm gonna let that one slide for now. But anyways, I'll have a rant when we do one of our bull shows. There we go. I talk about Ole Miss. So as I said, there are a lot of I think the committee did a good job of picking actual fun bowl games, even for teams who had lesser years for good matchups. So Chris and I will be back in a while. We will break down kind of the popular bowl games as we go for kind of the middle tier, and we will get closer to previewing the big ones. And God, there is a great slate of matchups, as Chris mentioned a handful of minutes ago, of a lot of top edge programs who have the same styles of matchups, which could lead to a lot of very good football between now and New Year's Day. So until then, as always, thanks for the support. We love you. The boys are out tonight. Stay safe. Peace.